All right, looks like we are broadcasting live to Zoom right now while we're getting Facebook up. Stacy LeBaron, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Dr. Chris. And how about you?
Oh, I am doing all right. We have our little cats and coffee that we did yesterday. It's kind of our weekly show, and I mentioned I'm kind of getting that quarantine haggardness going on myself. So I think that's kind of the roughest thing that I'm doing with. How are you managing with all of these things as well?
Doing well. I'm doing well. I live in Vermont. We seem to still be getting snow. And so unfortunately, springtime hasn't come. We can't wait for the flowers to bloom and all that kind of stuff, but it'll come. We're learning some patience here.
Great. All right, now we are officially live on Facebook as well. So I would like to welcome everybody to our Basepaws webinar series. Today we have got Stacy LeBaron on today, and Stacy is such a fantastic guest who really joined us on such short notice. But Stacy LeBaron has been involved in animal welfare for over 20 years. She currently hosts a weekly podcast called the Community Cats Podcast, where she interviews nationally and internationally renowned experts helping with the problem of cat overpopulation and cat welfare. Now, previous to starting the podcast, Stacy served for 16 years as the president of the Merrimack Feline River Society. Under her leadership, the society assisted over 105,000 cats and kittens through a variety of innovative programs. Among the society's programs are 2 mobile spay and neuter clinics, as well as the Catmobiles and an adoption center in Salisbury, Massachusetts. So Stacy, thank you so much for bringing this expertise about trap and neuter, or spay and neuter, and feline overpopulation to our broadcast. We're so excited to hear about it.
Thank you, Dr. Chris. Thank you. So shall I just launch right in?
Yeah, let's just go ahead and start rolling in. One thing real quick for the folks, if you do have questions during the presentation, we've got Facebook, just drop them in the chat there, or on Zoom, either in the chat or the Q&A, and we'll get to those as we move on through. So
Excellent.
Stacy, I will let you take it from here.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for having us, having the Community Cats podcast and having me here today to share with all of you on how you can turn your passion for cats into action. I really, really think this is an important part. It's a tagline for my podcast. It's a line that I just love. I want folks to feel empowered. We're all here because we love cats. We're here because we have cats. We care about them. We do what we need for them. We get our Basepaws, packages for them. And so I want to really help share with folks how you can help the cats in your community make a difference in the lives for the cats that are just in your own backyard. And it's not hard, it's not difficult, but many people feel like they can't do that. And so I want you to always keep in the back of your mind that you're going to turn your passion for cats into action and really create a community for cats. Part of knowing how to do that is sort of understanding the big picture. So today I'm going to share with you a little bit about what's going on in the animal welfare world across the nation, how we're all going to work together to ensure that every cat gets the help that they need in their community. I really am also a firm believer of the no cat left behind theory. So, we really want to make sure that we have all the necessary tools, programs, just ideas, a toolbox, your own toolbox, collection of things that you have in your own home to be able to help the cats in your backyard or in your community. You may see cats and you just don't know what to do. If you go to the local, drive-through restaurant, you may see some cats at a dumpster and you might not know, well, what should I do? Can I give them half of my hamburger? Or should I, be calling somebody? Should I be worried about this? Or is this normal? Why, what does this all mean? So we're going to talk a little bit about sort of animal welfare in the world. I'm at the end of the presentation, I am going to talk a little bit about coronavirus and how that impacts us and how that really has changed things for animal welfare. But for right now, I want to focus on you, focus on the folks that are here listening today and how they can help the cats in the community. And with that, I'm going to do it through some storytelling. So I'm going to share a few stories about sort of how did I grow up in the community cat world and how did I get used to this and involved and so passionate and really interesting and empowering people. So I'm going to share a little bit about my background. So I did start out back in 1994, which used to not seem so long ago, but I guess it does seem like a long time ago now. Back in 1994, I walked into this little shelter that had just opened up in Salisbury, Massachusetts. And I was feeling really proud of myself because I brought my bag of cat food. I had a 10-pound bag of dry cat food, and I had a 10-pound bag of cat litter. And I thought, oh, this will last them a week. You know, this will be fantastic. I was patting myself on the back, and I go walking up these little stairs, and I go in there, and these two wonderful women, but looking very exhausted, had just taken in 80 cats from a hoarding situation.
Ooh.
And in this very small space, lots of the cats were very shy. They were working on trying to give them vaccines and all this other stuff. And they were so thankful, and they were so gracious to me with my, at that point in time, became a very meager donation to the cause, because I realized I'm on a different scale here. So there was a big learning lesson. And that's one of the things that's really wonderful being involved with community cats, is a great learning lesson of every day I'm learning something new. It's them trying something new. There's just different things going on. And I'm meeting so many different people. You know, cat lovers are all kinds of people. So, you know, you're going to meet different ethnicities, different ages, different economic levels. There are people that I'm best friends with that I don't think I would have been best friends with without the cats. They are a bridge. They're a bridge to our community. And that's why they're so special, and why we really have to, you know, pay attention and care for them, you know, in our community, and care for each other. You know, we're caring for each other by caring for each other's cats. So that was my first day with regards to being involved with animal welfare, was my bag of litter and my dry, you know, cat food.
It's almost a little overwhelming when you kind of first step into that animal shelter, you know, kind of the rescue arena from there. I know there is, you know, like you mentioned, that scale changes. You know, as intimidating as it can be, there are a lot of folks, and like Stacy will talk to you about, is of how to get over that kind of intimidation, because every little bit does help.
I agree. And that's one of the reasons why I started the Community Cats podcast, was because I felt that sometimes people do feel intimidated, and they want to learn beforehand before they're committing to anything. And I went in there and I was overwhelmed, and I was like, oh, this is just emotionally wrenching. I can't, you know, oh, if I went in there, I'd take them all home and all that kind of stuff. And so, and over time I learned not to take them all home. And you know, we work hard at that many times. And, you know, so that donation became, you know, a $50 donation. And then they said they needed a volunteer to be their secretary. And I said, well, I can type, and I have a computer, and I can take notes. And so I volunteered for that position. And then the next year I was vice president, the next year I was president, which sort of moved things, you know, along in the process, because I was continually learning and trying new things. And this was a wonderful organization. The Merrimack River Feline Rescue Society started as a result of 300 cats living on the Newburyport waterfront. And just to paint the picture of what that looked like. So the Newburyport waterfront is sort of like a seaside town. So it's like Nantucket on the coast of Massachusetts, up on the northern coast of Massachusetts. So a lot of restaurants, very touristy, a lot of dumpsters. In the winter time, there would be these 300 cats. They'd be living there, and the restaurants had sliders. So you'd be in there having your steak tip dinner, and the cats would be sitting there with the ruddy, goopy eyes and like a limpy paw, looking in the sliding window at the folks eating their dinners. And so there were 5 residents in Newburyport who got together, and they felt, one of them was the head of the Chamber of Commerce. And she was a huge cat lover. She had 5 cats of her own. And they decided to start the Merrimack River Feline Rescue Society and start a trap, neuter, return program. Well, where did they get that idea? Way back when? This was in 1992. Where did they get this idea of trap, neuter, return? And there were 2 local veterinarians that were just starting up, and they were on the cutting edge. And they knew about trap, neuter, return. And they had some interesting ideas about how they wanted to identify the cats. They didn't ear tip them, but they notched them, which unfortunately looked like they notched in the left ear, which now we tip in the right ear. So, you know, everybody's a little different. But back then they were doing notching, and then everybody looked like they'd been in a fight. But they were on the right track with the spay neuter part of things. So they got the cats. There were these 300 cats. The first year, they ended up pulling in 125 friendly adult cats and kittens. And so they adopted out 125 cats. So there's the first reduction in the number of cats.
Yeah.
The previous year, they'd had a litter of kittens that tested positive for rabies.
Mhm.
Previous year, they'd had some drunk guy go into a boat. The cats had wintered in the boats, so they were trashing the boats that were being stored. Drunk guy went in and he took a baseball bat to some cats.
Oh,
And so, all these bad things were happening, and here we're going to start making some good happen. So we have 14 feeding stations established for the 300 cats, now down to 200, with them being trapped, neutered, and returned, and some of them adopted and placed. And so the numbers are down, and we have designated feeders that feed them a couple of times a day. The other thing that the veterinarians were really great about was that they were proponents of early age spay and neuter. So they were proponents of when a kitten is at about 2 pounds, between 8 to 10 weeks, they were doing early age spay neuter back in 1992, 93, which
mhm.
the first studies came out in 1989 out of Angel at MSPCA in Boston, saying that it was early to do, it was okay to do early spay neuter. So this organization did spay neuter before adoption since the beginning of time. So that was sort of how I was raised. Was we didn't we were what you would call a no-kill shelter. So we euthanized animals, cats that were suffering, but we never euthanized for space.
Mhm.
So we would do trap, neuter, return. We would spay, neuter before adoption, spay, neuter kittens ahead of time. And, little did I know at that point in time that these were really progressive things to be doing,
Yeah.
that we were just doing because it was who we were. And it
Oh,
seemed to work and it made sense. And then we started getting phone calls from other organizations around the state. Well, why can't you do what you're doing there for us? Why can't you do that for us? And so over time, it actually ended up morphing into what was a mentoring program. And I ended up mentoring over 80 organizations all around the country on how to start what's called this trap, neuter, return program. So from the Merrimack River Feline Rescue Society, that's sort of where my first aha moment was, and I'm going to slip through some aha moments later. But from Dr. Chris, from your perspective, trap, neuter, return, does it make sense to you?
Well, absolutely. Trap, neuter, return. There are a couple things. Whenever you want to talk about return, the biggest thing about the trap, neuter, return part of that scenario to me is the return. Where are we taking them back to? The trapping, the neutering. Those are the first two steps that are very straightforward and very concrete, in that these need to be done to kind of help maintain. But we also don't want to take our cats that are in a bad situation, remove them from that bad situation, and give them all these good things, and then return them to a bad situation. And so, making sure, I think that's the most critical part that a lot of times we forget about when we think about feral cat overpopulation is where are we going back to, and how do we make this scenario a better scenario for those that have already been spayed and neutered and are returning to that environment itself.
Right. And I think that's a really interesting question, because when we've done monitored trap, neuter, return, there's a lot of knowledge there, and it takes a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of volunteer time and effort to be able to, determine, does this cat have shelter? Is this quality of life the type of quality of life that you want this cat to have?
Yeah.
And nowadays there's something called return to field, which is more the cat's physical body type is going to tell you whether the cat's coming from a place that's okay or not okay.
Mhm.
So when you have a spay neuter clinic where anybody can bring a trapped cat in and they're returning it, and you don't necessarily know the details around how that cat is being returned, but yet you're looking at the cat and the cat's coat is good. The cat has good weight. The teeth are good. Everything seems to be fine from a physical standpoint. You're using that as a determinant to basically have an educated guess that there's somebody out there caring for that cat. Do I need to know the details? Maybe yes, maybe no, but the cat itself is presenting itself in a way saying, wherever I was already pretty good.
Yeah.
So that's sort of the mentality with the higher volume spay neuter programs that have really taken off in the last 10 years. So I came from this small scale environment, and we fast forward through into a much higher volume situation nationally. We're doing this return to field, and you may
Mhm.
hear that phrase, where a lot of cats are going, back, but we don't necessarily know this is part of colony A or colony B, and Sally Sue is taking care of that cat. I'm going to proceed through here.
Perfect.
and just talk a little bit more about some of my aha moments, which I love aha moments. They're the best things to ever have. I hope to have at least one or two a year, but you never know. We try our best. So I've talked about trap, neuter, return, how that was really transformational and understanding where we're going in terms of reducing cat overpopulation. One thing I haven't even mentioned is that our ultimate goal is to reduce the number of cats that are out there.
Mhm.
Newburyport, Massachusetts is piping plover birder heaven. And a lot of the folks that love birds are not necessarily fans of trap, neuter, return, but they are in Newburyport because we have no cats. We've gone from 300 cats down to 0. In 2008, there were no more cats living on the waterfront. The last feeding station was closed. And so how can Audubon or a bird organization, any type of or any bird lover, not like the fact that really any unowned cat that's out there has now aged out, and we don't have them anymore.
Mhm.
So it's really a perfect match from the objective of reducing the number of cats that are out there and free roaming in the community. Certainly owned cats are going to be out there. The local shelter that is part of this organization, they will take in, free roaming cats periodically. They're
Mhm.
microchipped, and their owners are found right away. So we've been very aggressive with microchipping too. So that has been really good to be able to get the cats back to their original owners. So that's been an excellent thing too.
Well, and did you have any offenders that was like, oh, we've got, a tabby cat out in this area, microchip, figure it out. And then the next week it's like, oh, that cat it's out again. And then the week after it's like, oh, and then you just start knowing them all by name.
Oh yeah, yep. We had the Siamese cat named George, who he would come to the bank. So he lived in a house down the street. So and then they came to a bank, and then the bank would be like, George is here again, like that kind of thing. And so we have this sort of vicious cycle. Yes, there are always some frequent flyers, definitely, but that's part of being in the community and knowing, and
Mhm.
George had a spraying problem. So George, they did what they could, but he stopped spraying when he was allowed to go outside. So we had to appreciate that. It's not that we were against having cats going outside. We do a barn relocation program.
Mhm.
There's, it's a gray area. It's not black and white. Every cat has a different package of environment that works well for it. So we try to be as understanding with that as possible, but we do want to reduce the number of cats that are out there and traveling and homeless. We really want to reduce that number of cats, and so that's our objective through the trap,
Mhm.
neuter, return programs. I do want to spend some time though talking about low cost spay neuter for owned cats. So my second aha moment came when it was about 1998 or early 2000s, where statistically speaking, we had started doing a lot of trap, neuter, return, a lot of spay neuter. I had started free spay neuter clinics for a lot of organizations that couldn't afford the higher costs, $150 for a spay, which back in Massachusetts, it was $150 in the 90s to get a cat spayed.
Oh.
And so, I had these groups that were starting up. They'd call me and they say, I can't afford to do that for the 10 cats in my colony. And so we started free spay neuter clinics for feral cats because I figured I can't run 10 shelters, but I could run a monthly spay neuter clinic to help 100 feral cats with volunteer help and that kind of thing. So we have donated veterinarians donate their time. Technicians donate their time, volunteers donate their time in their monthly clinics, and they've been going on since 2000. It was the way to be able to make that free so people could go out and do their trapping, maintain their colonies, forge those relationships, but still be able to, they didn't have to pay that big, huge bill and do all that fundraising to pay the big bill.
Mhm.
So that was for the feral cats, but I didn't have anything for the owned cats. So, that's a lot of money for people who are just trying to pay the rent and stuff, $150. And say, maybe you've got, Adam and Eve, and they happen to live in your house together and they're not spayed or neutered. Well, then Adam and Eve have kittens. So there's 6 cats. So then you add all that money up, and that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
And so when we really weren't changing the numbers in the shelters were not changing with these trap, neuter, return programs. So then we started getting involved with low-cost spay and neuter. So there was a program called TEAM, Tate's Every Animal Matters, out of Connecticut, run by Dr. John Caltabiano. Dynamic, fantastic character. And he ran a mobile spay neuter clinic for owned cats. And he just drove all around Connecticut and just did surgeries all the time. And he offered like a $50 or $75 package. Back in 1998, he started that program. And I said, you know what, that's a really great idea. Let's get to the owned population, because that's where it starts. People are always saying, well, the problem are the cats that are outside. Well, the problem is that there's Adam and Eve, and they start out in the homes, and then they get released, they get let out, and that's where they meet, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It all starts, so much of the, we have that outdoor population, but if we take that back, we roll that back, they came from us. They came from our homes, those protective spaces first, to really let those seeds take root before they were then released out.
Right, right. So with that, we decided to start a mobile spay neuter clinic called the Catmobile. So we have,
I love that name. Love it.
we have the Catmobile, and luckily our veterinarian that was doing rounds at the time, I was downstairs in the office, and she was passing by after doing rounds, and I said, hey, Dr. Brady, would you like to have a Catmobile? And she said, sure, I'm totally on board. And so that's became a wonderful relationship with the Dr. Brady and our Catmobile. And we started, and we really felt that being mobile was a great idea for us, because we are located in the northern part of the state, and we wanted to be able to reach far regions of the state. And also, if there was some area where it seemed like they really needed more surgery services, we could just move ourselves there. We didn't have to have a transport, so we could embed ourselves in the community. We wanted to be a community resource. We didn't want to be just a stationary location where people would have to figure out how to come to us. Because oftentimes people who need assistance with low-cost spay neuter, they don't have a car, they don't have transportation. They have to take off from work, so they're going to try and drop the cats off before work or after work, because they can't take off from work because they can't miss the paycheck. So there's a lot of obstacles. So we try to locate ourselves as close to them as possible, so that those costly obstacles aren't there. So even if we do make the surgery free with grant money, there's still costs to them that we have to be aware of and appreciative of that too. And I think this was a part of the puzzle that we overlooked for a long period of time. We didn't realize how beneficial this service was going to be. So this is really what has made a huge dent in the overpopulation situation for shelters. Many people are aware that shelters used to euthanize due to space constraints, and in many parts of the country, that's not happening anymore. So that's really great and good and exciting and should be celebrated. And a lot of that is through the fact that they've got these low-cost spay neuter programs for owned cats. I think it's important, if you are a person out there in the community and you feel, and you've come across getting either from a friend or a family member, 50% of us still get our pets from friends and family. So if you're getting a cat from friends or family, please take advantage of these low cost opportunities if it's needed. It's really critical that you get your cat spayed or neutered. And I don't know anybody who wants to live with an unneutered male cat. So they're really take advantage of these opportunities. And right now with coronavirus, we'll have a little bit of a conversation near the end about that, about how it's a little bit different. But in a normal day, it's important for us to support these programs. So I just wanted to share about how important that is. Now, one thing that I've developed through the Community Cats podcast, and I'll just share a bit about the Community Cats podcast at this moment in time, is we've recorded about 350 episodes. So the Community Cats podcast is a weekly podcast that comes out. We also do other educational opportunities, like we have an online kitten conference that's coming up in June. Right now, for coronavirus, I'm doing Community Cats and Coronavirus pop-up panels on Saturdays at 2 Eastern Time and Mondays at 4 Eastern Time. So, and I do have a blog post that comes out every week, and with lots of ideas and tips on how you can help with volunteering and that kind of thing. So I think that there's some great resources there. A lot of information I get to about, how to determine whether a cat is a lost or found cat. Should I worry about a cat in my backyard? What should I do if I see little kittens? Should I leave them alone? Which the answer is yes, for a couple of hours at least, and to make sure mom comes back. If mom does not come back after a few hours and they don't seem to be very, they don't seem to have much life to them, then you're going to need to seek assistance. And that's where you start Googling the kitten lady and the National Kitten Coalition, and you find out how to do the bottle baby kitten thing, which that was one of the volunteer opportunities I never signed up for because my sleep was too important. I think the world of the folks that do the bottle feeding, because I cannot do it. I need more than 2 hours of sleep at a time. That was my soft spot was always the cats that were 10 years of age or older that came into the shelter, because
Yeah.
I felt that was a stressful environment for an old cat. And so I was always the first one folks would call and say, Stace, we need a foster for this 10-year-old cat. And that's all they had to say too was if the owner had passed away. I was pretty well hooked on that one. And, because I just felt terrible. So we all have our passions. And that's another thing in this whole industry. You don't have to have all of the ability to do everything. It's a team thing. So it's just understanding what is it that you're good at, or what is it that you want to learn how to do. So here's my third aha moment. I'm sharing 3 aha moments with everybody. And so I really thought it was really important to share with the community at large why having owned cat spay neuter programs as your largest program is being most important. And this is how we're going to change the landscape with regards to cats in our community. So many of us really focus up at the top of the pyramid. Looking at my community cat pyramid, the top of the pyramid talks about rescue and adoption, sanctuary. We need a cat sanctuary for all the cats that have diabetes or the feline leukemia cats. We have to relocate them to barns because the world is terrible. Well, if we don't have the cats there in the first place, we don't have to relocate them. So there's the name of the game is to not have the colony there in the first place. And if we're going to look at that as being our source, then we're looking at really encouraging our neighbors, ourselves, our community to have the best sterilization rate possible for all of the cats in the community, regardless of whether they're owned or they are community cats. Anything that's 4 paws on the pavement, or that are, female, male cat, not spayed or neutered, that are meeting, they all need to be spayed or neutered. And that is definitely my first and foremost, my mantra. And I just wanted to have this pyramid as a way of explaining how important we as organizations really need to focus on that component, because sometimes that mission is lost. Sometimes we get really focused on the adoption side of things, and the stories are great. They really are great. And I'm going to just go on a quick little soapbox here and just say that we all love the stories. I love the stories. I mean, anyone sends me a story about, a kitten with a broken leg, and I'm going to shell out money for that, but the fact that an organization is assisting the owned cat population with spay and neuter and doing trap, neuter, return means a lot more for the overall community. And it's important for us to know that when we're looking at organizations that we want to work with, is just try and see if they are covering or collaborating with other organizations that do offer those services. Just make sure that this community cat pyramid is fully utilized and you're not just participating in one part of it. I don't know, Dr. Chris, does this community cat pyramid make sense to you?
Well, I love the community cat pyramid, from a visual representation standpoint. Like you mentioned, we get so much of our time and energy that focuses on that rescue and adoption. And you mentioned the stories, but also kind of the visibility, if you will, assisting an owned cat population of so many owned cats never really make it out of the home or off property into veterinary clinics. And so we see this rescue and adoption problem and we work to fix this problem. And if we only focus on working to fix this problem, we're just band-aiding a situation. We're not actually turning around and solving. We're kind of just helping the situation perpetuate in some ways. And so getting this nice visual representation to let everyone see that, we do have this hugest problem, or the hugest population within the owned cats, that allows for all of the ramifications to roll out. So looking at it in that more holistic way, like I say, I love this pyramid, and I think it needs to be everywhere, including like basically every veterinary clinic possible.
Right. And one statistic that is pretty common across the high volume, high quality spay neuter clinics across the country is about 90% of the cats that come into those clinics have not seen a veterinarian. So, when we first started out back in 2008, we would get questions like, oh, well, you're going to take all the business away from the veterinarians and blah, 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 and all that stuff. And over time, it got to the point where, in reality, the veterinarians wanted our business card so that they
Mhm.
could hand it out, because we were performing a service that really they would do, but they wouldn't be able to do it affordably.
Mhm.
And in some cases, all we're providing is the spay neuter part of it. So now we're walking down the road, and now these cats are 10 years old. I mean, they are starting to have dental issues and having some other issues. So now the animal welfare world is looking at, well, how can we support those kinds of services? Because, you know, these folks still, they don't have the money to afford, you know, a full mouth dental extraction. So it's, you know, that's a huge expense. And, you know, there are people who say, oh, well, if they can't afford it, they shouldn't have cats. And the community, 50% of people get their cats from friends and family. So how do you say no to that? It's not like we're policing that. You know, I don't know if you have thoughts on that one.
Well, I firmly agree with that. You know, before COVID times, you know, we'll pre-COVID on there. You know, during weekends as well, I do some low-cost vaccine clinics, and we had that same initial reaction from people of saying, hey, you know, you're going to take all our business, you're going to remove it, you're going to pull that rug out, and the vast majority of people that we service are really not there for the full end spectrum on there. They're doing the best that they can with the resources that they have, and providing homes that can be happy, healthy, and loving. But just because it's on a budget doesn't mean that we shouldn't offer these things on a budget if we can make it work. And
Right.
I certainly think that doing that really helps our own population so much more than I think we really thought of in the industry itself.
Right. I agree. I'm going to move along here. And I want to talk about volunteering. And this is where I'm going to funnel in some of the conversation around coronavirus too, and the coronavirus conversation. Now, many of you have seen the hashtag stay home and foster. And
Mhm.
that's been a big push during this period of time, because the shelters were really worried about, number one, being able to take care of the cats in a sheltered environment with being socially distanced. And so there was big push to move all the cats into foster care, cats and kittens into foster care. There's worries about cats coming in from COVID positive homes and how to isolate. And that's a learning curve. It seems like every week things are changing as
Mhm.
to best practices on how we should be operating. And so everybody jumped on that foster care bandwagon. Most organizations have waiting lists now with regards to foster care, which is wonderful. Everybody's
Mhm.
like, I've been furloughed, I'm going home. You know, the kids are gonna go crazy. So this is my time to get them a cat or a dog or whatever, and help the overall cause. And so, and it's wonderful. It's really great. And I think the hope is most of these families will become foster failures and
Mhm.
will adopt their charges that they've weathered the coronavirus storm together. And I hope everybody is happy, healthy, and safe throughout this whole process that we're going through at this point in time. It's scary. We have anxiety, and our pets are the ones that are going to help relieve some of that anxiety that we have. So I'm really glad that so many people have brought pets home with them to help them through this time. So, but also, if you are a foster home on the waiting list, don't be upset. It's just the time. It's just the way it's gone. There are other ways you can certainly volunteer for an organization, and that is by being aware of the cats in your own community. Reaching out, even though we cannot do spay neuter services in many areas at this point in time, get involved with a local trap and neuter group and reach out and say, hey, do you have any feeders that can't make it here, because oftentimes they're feeders that will feed at like 20 different locations, and they go and
Mhm.
they do their rounds. Can I provide support? Can I help the community cats? I'm going out on a walk every day. While I'm walking, I can feed. There's no restrictions about feeding community cats at this point in time. If you're out walking around, as long as you're not doing it in a party of 20, you can go and feed colony cats, at a designated feeding station. So, get engaged, get involved. The one thing that's going to be critical going forward, because we are not able to do spay neuter in a large scale right now, is that whole monitoring thing.
Mhm.
Monitoring is going to be even more important, because that trapping window is going to be really short because, or we're either that or we're going to have kittens grow up to be feral cats. So right now, cats will be having kittens. So we have about, 6 to 8 weeks. But then when they get to be about 14 to 16 weeks, they get ferally. What does ferally mean? Ferally means that they are very antisocial. They can be hissy spitty when you try and hold them. They take a lot of time and effort to socialize and be the cute, adorable, cuddly kitten that we want. The objective for any trapper out there is to get those kittens before they turn ferally. And we're going to have a hard time because there's going to be 20 colonies in the same position and you only have one. There are only so many trappers. So as many foster homes as we have, we may need as many trappers so that we're all out there trapping at the same time and being able to assist getting these kittens from outdoors. Now, if you do get some kittens in, you could be your own foster home. You could be helping foster. You don't have to go through an organization to be a foster home. You can foster your own cats in your own community. So there's enough support out there, resources out there where you can be your own, basically your own shelter. Or some people have talked about how our communities are turning into our animal shelters. So rather than thinking of our physical shelters, we're thinking about now our community as our shelter. So we're going to give the tools to people to help shelter the animals that need help or the cats that need help. So that's where you can play a role. But get involved, get support from the local groups, learn from here, learn from these presentations, learn from the Kitten Lady and from other resources. There is, if you really want to get intense, you can subscribe to the Animal Welfare Digest, which talks about like how animal control officers are going through this. The National Animal Control Officers Association has its own podcast, which is great, talking about the experiences of going into a COVID positive home and how they are getting the animals out. So if that's interesting to you, everybody has their own unique interests. Mine is in fundraising. So I would always tell trappers for every trapper that's out there, I need 4 people fundraising. So maybe fundraising is your thing. Sharing cat information with others in your community. There's so many chat boards out there. There's Nextdoor, there's the Facebook groups, there's everything. Do some research, go to Alley Cat Allies, Neighborhood Cats, find resources about how to help cats, especially kitten care will be important, and also trapping. Share those on your community boards. Lost and found information. There's a Lost Cat Finder. She's got some great information on lost and found cats. People need those kinds of resources, and they need that kind of help. So those are some ideas for folks that are out there today who can turn their passion for cats into action, which is really easy to do. It's so easy to do, and we should all do it. And then we're ensuring that the cats in our communities are all well cared for and taken care of, and they have everything that they need. So let me just see if there's, at this point in time, I'm just saying thank you. And there's my contact information. And I don't know if there are any further questions, if there are questions coming up on board.
Oh, yes, we have. We certainly have questions coming. Now, with all of those resources, I want to let folks know that I'm going to, of course, get a list and talk with you, and we'll post them all up together so that you don't have to kind of frantically try and write and Google all of these things. I promise we will get you those links and get you kind of some of those resources as well. But as Stacy mentioned, this is her contact information. So feel free to email or call her right on there. But we have so many questions coming in, but I think we're gonna, pull down on the presentation so that we can just kind of see and really get to that conversation personally as we answer these questions that have been rolling through.
So would you like me to stop sharing my screen?
Yeah, go ahead and stop sharing on there so that we'll let our folks see you a little bit better on there.
All right.
Now, oh my goodness. So, kind of first off, from a lot of these a lot of the questions that we get, of course, are about kittens and about care. Like EK asked, are there any tips or resources to start caring for kittens? And I think, as you mentioned, there is a variety of those online resources that people can really use. And, do you feel like they're sufficient, or kind of when do you start to feel the kitten care needs that veterinary involvement as well?
Okay, so certainly the resources that I love are the National Kitten Coalition, as well as the Kitten Lady, Hannah Shaw. Both of them she has a great YouTube page, and she's full of a lot of resources. I think that having a veterinarian involved early on in the process, just as a support, is really good. So if you have a relationship with a veterinarian with your own pets, and you just say, hey, I just want to let you know, I took in a litter of kittens. They seem to be doing fine today, but I just sort of, is there anything I need to worry about that I need to check in on? Because there may be times down the road you might need a, dewormer. They might have some, failure. They might not be gaining weight well. They might have fleas, and how do you do the flea bath without getting the stuff in their eyes? And there's a great video of Hannah taking this little tiny kitten, and like she's doing a flea bath with the soap, the dish soap, but you can't get it around their head and stuff too. So there's, it's a fancy dance getting all those fleas off. And so, there's these things that you think that wouldn't be hard, but they're totally hard when you're dealing with little kittens, and knowing, when to bring them in and when not to, and how to deal with mom, feral mom. There's pregnancy complications, knowing if there's a pyometria going on where that needs, emergency surgery. So I would say if you do have a relationship with a local veterinarian, you should certainly check in with them. If you're in a situation where you don't have a real relationship with a veterinarian, and I'd still call them anyway. All they can say, well, no, we don't know you, so we're not going to listen to you. But and then if that's the case, then I'd reach out to the local shelter, and probably they have a shelter veterinarian that would be willing to help too.
Absolutely. And yeah, we always reinforce making sure you start that conversation with a veterinarian early. The earlier you start a conversation, the easier it is to continue that conversation. There's a lot of things going on right now, and always just picking up that phone or sending that quick email can make a huge difference on there. Now, another question that we got from Haley was about kind of that conversation that you may have with people that aren't as worried about spaying and neutering cats. Are there any specific tactics, like in Haley's situation? There's a friend that lives on a farm that has some cats in the barn, and they're not as worried because kittens will become more barn cats, sort of scenario. Kind of how would you approach that conversation?
Right. So my assumption is that they just figure Mother Nature is going to kill off a few of the cats, and so therefore then they always need cats because they need them for rodents or mousing and that kind of thing. Which that is true. I mean, it's working cat program, but there's an easier way to do it. I mean, you have to connect the person to say that there are other programs where you can continue to get barn cats. It's not that fun for cats to continue to have kittens all the time. Pretty stressful on the moms. Also, if you do get them spayed and neutered and you do get them in at night, you could very well end up with barn cats that are going to last you 15 years. If you do the right things for the barn cat, if they're willing to do that. Now, I certainly know you have to pick your battles in this world, and you have to realize, are their ears turned on or are they turned off? So you do have to find out. And the thing that I do in challenging situations is I try to figure out what's their motivator. What's going to change their behavior, and what might change my behavior might not change theirs. So is it expense? Is there an expense issue? Is there a logistical issue? They just don't know. But I mean, the cats are going to be happier and healthier if they're spayed and neutered, and they're going to last longer, and they'll be more solid. So that's sort of the way that I would approach it, is just saying, well, don't you just not, want the headache, and you just want these cats? Don't you want the same cats here just doing the job for a longer period of time? It's sort of like, you get that car and you invest in it long enough. And so like after 3 years, you don't have to change the car out, you've got it. So if that's that person's type of personality, and I don't know them intimately, but I would just try and figure out an angle to get to your end result, regardless of the path.
Yeah, and there are so many different routes that it's amazing to hear the different reasons of why people don't want to spay and neuter or deal with things. And there's usually, like you say, a lot of times a practicality or a logistical issue that you can start to make that mind turn a little bit of, well, I really don't want to deal with this all the time. And it is nice to just have that consistency in my life. Now we do, we mentioned a little earlier, we never really dove into it a little bit about kind of how COVID has affected, spay and neuter. What are some of the interesting things that you're seeing? I know, of course, we are having a drop in the mass, but there's probably some more interesting things that are coming around as well, aren't
Yeah, okay. So yeah, with regards to COVID and spaying and neutering. So for folks that don't know, veterinary practices in general, some states, I think, and you might know more about this, Dr. Chris, than me, is that veterinary practices are deemed essential services
you?
in most, I would say most of the states. I can't think of a state where it's not deemed an essential service. However, with that said, non-urgent procedures are not supposed to occur in many of the veterinary practices. And the question is, what do you call non-urgent? What do you call essential? How do you define that? So anyway, that's not a conversation I'll jump right into today on that one. But in most cases, most practices are reducing or not having elective spay neuter procedures happening at this point in time. Something that can be delayed will be delayed. And so that's happening. So there's a huge worry about the number of kittens that are going to be born outside because people aren't bringing cats in to be spayed or neutered at the sterilization, at the spay neuter clinics. So with that said, there are some alternatives out there that are not in practice yet, but they're in part of the conversation. So there is a non-surgical sterilant, and there's a bait that you can put in that will prevent female cats from ovulating. So it's a birth control pill, basically. It's a birth control pill for cats.
Mhm.
And that's been around since the late 90s. And but they're sort of resuscitating that, thinking, well, maybe we can put that in the food until it buys us time and we can get the clinics going. So there's some interesting options being talked about out there with regards to how we can reduce that rise of births that we may or may not have. We're all in this big waiting game. We just don't know what kind of a population slam we're going to get by not sterilizing cats for 2 or 3 months. And so it's going to be interesting to see it all shakes out. There is non-surgical sterilization too that's on the research front, and that's with an organization called ACCMD, and they're just at the forefront of this, and they think that they'll have that going, 5 years or so, 3 to 5 years. There's a lot of testing. I mean, you know what it's like.
I know.
It's hard to it's hard to put a timeline on things. And so I don't think there's going to be a speed pass on this one, where there's so much human stuff going on too right now.
Mhm.
If you do, one thing I will say with regards to coronavirus and COVID-19 is that if you do come down with the virus, they are highly recommending that you not that you isolate yourself from people, but also from your pets. And I
Yes.
think that's, I mean, I wouldn't say this in front of my husband, but it's harder. It's easier to isolate from him than it is from my cat. And so it's, because when I'm not feeling well, I want to cuddle with my cat, and I think that's the way we all feel. And but it's really a recommendation. I'll just put it that way. It's a recommendation, and I think it's something that we should all try our best to abide by. If you do take in a cat from someone who has come down with a coronavirus too, that cat should be isolated from your other pets and also from other people, just for a 14, I believe it's a 14-day period of time, just to be safe. It's the transmission is much higher people to people. And
Mhm.
Dr. Krish, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is the transmission is much higher people to people, but we also are just expressing a level of caution when it comes to cats and dogs.
Absolutely. And like I say, it is still very much a human to human virus, is how the outbreak and how the pandemic is sustaining itself on there. Those are the main drivers from there. But just out of an abundance of caution, from the beginning, the CDC was recommending to self-isolate from pets as if possible. And that guidance, a lot of that guidance came from the original SARS outbreak as well back in the early 2000s. So um, we don't expect there's never been any signs that show any cat to human transmission or anything like that. So please don't be concerned from that front. It's just, this is more of if you can, it's certainly the recommendation that we're going off of right now.
I have a quick question for you,
Yeah.
Dr. Chris, because this
Okay.
was, I run these online groups with animal welfare groups. So I had one with all the groups in Massachusetts earlier today. And a
Hmm.
big question that came up to me was wildlife issues. So wildlife, bats, sometimes, springtime's here, sometimes bats will get into people's barns and their garages and that kind of thing. And getting exposed to wildlife. And some of the wildlife facilities have had to really curtail their responsiveness or their ability to help. I mean, are there any recommendations on things we should be doing with regards to wildlife?
Well, you brought up bats, and bats are, one of the biggest things that we always worry about with wildlife. No matter if you or your contact or your cat ever come into contact with a cat or with a bat. Oh my goodness, getting my words confused right now. If you ever come in contact with a bat, please, 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 please call your local public health department pretty much immediately. There are bats. While bats do have a variety of diseases that they can hold, the one we always worry about is rabies. And so while we are in this time where we may have a little bit of an upswing in those encounters, we want to make sure that we don't have any upswings in those cases as well. That is one of the really interesting things about COVID, is how many dominoes that kind of will fall. That we get focused on COVID, but there's still going to be four dominoes that roll down each line that happen from there as well. So yes, that's the biggest one. Make sure you worry about, always talk, and they'll talk you through whether or not you need it, or how to get the different services that you need.
The other topic that came up in the call today too was about pet food insecurity and the challenges around that. So that's another thing that you could do as a volunteer too, is contribute pet food. And I would strongly advocate your local human food shelf or food pantry, really advocate that they carry pet food, because some don't. And I think it should be given that all the human food pantries out there, the people food pantries, have pet food as part of it. Because we dealt with a situation several years ago of a gentleman who was feeding his cats mac and cheese that he got from the food pantry, because that
Oh,
was the only thing that he could access. So it was, 65 cats being fed mac and cheese, and he should have gotten cat food.
yeah, absolutely. And I know there's, if your local rescue or shelter has not seen it, of course, a lot of pet food companies right now are starting to spin up programs that are specifically COVID related as well. So make sure that they keep an eye out on those. I don't have any specific ones off the top of my head, but I think I've seen announcements from Purina and Hill so far, maybe on there
Yeah.
for.
Yeah, they're working through Greater Good.
Okay.
And there's an organization called Rescue Bank, and you can donate directly to that too. But Rescue Bank is really doing some great stuff.
Oh, that's so good. I mean, yeah, there's so many aspects that need help right now. Now, kind of rolling back into ferals, we've got a couple more questions before
Yep.
our time is up here today. But Heather asked the question. You mentioned the Farrelly kittens, kind of when they hit that 14-week period.
Right.
Now, she's been helping with 4 ferals that she cares for, but as they get older, they're healthy now. If you kind of have this Farrelly kitten or Farrelly cat now, kind of adult cat that has let those habits and really sink in, what happens if diseases start to happen? Kind of what's a good way to approach that?
Right. Right. I've had the pleasure of owning many Farrelly kittens who've turned into Farrelly cats. I proudly call them my no-see-ums. And so, yeah, so if they do get sick or get in, I mean, I had one that enjoyed eating a plant that she shouldn't have, and
Mhm.
she was not feeling very well. And it's a challenge. It's a challenge depending on the level of the cat's, illness.
Mhm.
Sometimes you can get the cat because the cat's not feeling that well. I have had to trap a cat in my house, set up a trap. And I will first and foremost try and isolate that cat in a room so I can monitor what they're eating, they're drinking. If you're in a multi-cat household, you never know what's going on.
Mhm.
So the first thing I'll try and do is I'll try and corral the cat into a bathroom so that then I can see how the cat's doing from that standpoint. And then if I feel the cat needs to go to a vet, I'll get the cat either in what's called a transfer cage or in a trap, which is safe, can go to the veterinarian. Then they just can can anesthetize the cat through the trap, and then they can do an exam that way in a safe way. So you have to let the cat tell you sort of what their needs are. I hope I'm answering that question. I'm sort of getting the cat to the vet for you, but there's a lot of evaluation that you have to have going on in there too.
Well, I think you answered it fantastically. You know, the fairly as they get older, you know, in many ways I always like to use the term that cats are half domesticated, just as a general species, and so there is kind of that flip that they can stay back towards that wild side, and so making sure that you can isolate and see and kind of more control that environment, but also making sure you don't put yourself at too much risk in there. You know, they can cause a lot of damage on there, so trapping a cat, even if it's in your own home, can be, if it's the safest way for you and the cat, then certainly please move down through there, through that way. Now, you know, we also talked a little earlier about those low-cost spay and neuter clinics for owners. You know, what are there any options? Elizabeth was asking if there's any options for cats that have like health concerns, like heart murmurs, that aren't as readily accepted at these locations.
It's a great question. And I'm really glad she brought that up because it's a topic I wanted to make sure we shared about today. That's another piece of the puzzle that is starting to be addressed, which is how to help those other aspects of care that that's above and beyond the spay and neuter. And that's uncharted territory. So there are a lot of people will do things like they'll create their own GoFundMe page to help support that, get friends and family to help support. There's an organization called waggle.org that you can go to, and you can post your pet's story, need for assistance. And that in some cases, there's a 50% match of funding. So if you need to raise $1,000, you might only have to raise 500. If there's like cancer involved or something, you can get assistance that way. Oftentimes a local veterinarian will have their own buddy fund or something like that, which will help with costs and can provide some discounts. The local shelters also to have a program. We have a program at the Merrimack River Feline Rescue Society called the FARS program. It's a veterinary assistance program where people apply for assistance to get supportive veterinary care that they can't afford. So like in a situation where a cat's got a heart murmur, you need to do an ultrasound on a pretty regular basis. That can be pretty expensive. So there are definitely some options out there, but you might have to do some research locally. But waggle.org is great on a national scale.
Perfect. Yeah, and that's, like I say, we'll include that link as well for y'all. Just we'll have, like I say, a big set of resources for you after this point in time. And thank you so much for sharing all of those. You know, we are coming a little bit to our close here. I wanted to mention something that Basepaws is doing this month as well. It kind of really relates into this conversation. One of the things is that if you do foster or adopt a cat this month, please contact us. We're giving out free kits to in this time, just to kind of help some people learn more about their cats as they have a new cat coming into their home, or even in a foster situation. We'll help you learn more about that cat. Maybe it'll be a foster fail, or maybe you can use that to kind of help a prospective adopter to learn more about those as well. So, you know, I've got one last question for you. Is there anything else that we did not cover that you want to kind of leave us with?
Sure. Well, I certainly want to encourage everybody to take some action today, tomorrow, as soon as possible, to try and do something to help improve the lives of cats in your communities. I love what I do. I love the cats that I've been able to help. I love the people I've met in all of this. And so it's really fun. I have a bazillion stories I could share, but I won't do that. And you will have your stories. That's the thing. That's the important part, is creating the stories that you're going to create, meeting your neighbors, meeting the cats in the community, helping cats, and you're just going to feel so good, and it's great. So please just turn your passion for cats into action and do it today or tomorrow, please.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your passion and helping people kind of down that road. Folks, we are signing off. We have another webinar for you next week. It'll be next Friday. We have Dr. Ken Lambrecht and Dr. Bar Hadar, and we'll be talking a little bit about telemedicine and obesity in cats as well. So everyone have a fantastic Thursday and stay safe out there. Make sure you, of course, keep washing your hands, and we will see you all again soon.